The studio was never meant to feel this quiet. The lights had gone dark one by one until only a single bulb remained glowing above the empty soundstage. The crew had left hours ago. The cameras were covered, the doors were locked. The city outside was alive with noise and hunger and neon, but inside the building time slowed, as if the night itself had decided to pause and watch. Marilyn Monroe remained. She had stayed behind without telling anyone. She often did. She liked the moment after the world stopped asking things from her. The moment when the name Marilyn Monroe no longer echoed through corridors and contracts and expectations, and instead became just a woman standing alone in borrowed silence. She walked slowly across the wooden floor, heels in her hand, her bare feet making soft contact with the surface where hours earlier she had been told where to stand, how to smile, when to turn. The floor remembered her weight. The walls remembered her laughter. The mirrors remembered a version of her she was no longer performing for. She reached the edge of the stage and stopped. There was an old record player there, forgotten by a prop assistant, its lid slightly open like an invitation. She knelt and touched it gently as if afraid sound itself might break the spell. She chose a record without thinking. She didn't read the label. She didn't need to. The needle dropped, and the room filled with music that wasn't meant for an audience. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was warm. It curled through the air and settled into her chest. She closed her eyes. She didn't smile for anyone. She didn't pose. She didn't correct herself. She let the music enter her the way she wished love would stay. She began to move, not like Marilyn Monroe, not like the sex symbol, not like the woman the magazines demanded. She moved like a child who had found a melody in the dark and trusted it. She lifted her arms slowly, not for the camera, but because it felt good to stretch. She turned once, then again, her dress catching air, her hair loosening its careful shape. She laughed softly, not because something was funny, but because the body remembers joy even when the mind forgets it. For the first time that day, maybe that week, maybe that month, there was no role to protect, no image to maintain, no fear of being watched. She danced badly at first. She stumbled. She corrected nothing. She let her feet choose their own rhythm. She let her shoulders drop. She let the tension leave her spine. She danced for the girl she had been before anyone told her she was beautiful, before anyone told her beauty was her job. She danced for the hours she spent alone as a child, imagining stages and applause but not knowing the cost. She danced for the nights she cried in hotel rooms filled with flowers she hadn't earned and love she hadn't been given. She danced because the music asked nothing of her. She moved faster now, then slower, then still again, listening to her breath, listening to the sound of fabric against skin, listening to the echo of her steps bouncing off walls that no longer judged her. In that moment she was not late, she was not difficult, she was not fragile, she was not a headline, she was not a fantasy, she was simply alive and unobserved, and that was freedom. She spun once more and stopped in the center of the stage, arms open, heart racing, eyes closed as if the darkness itself were holding her. The music played on. She did not know that this night would become one of the few memories untouched by regret. She did not know that this was happiness in its purest form, not loud, not permanent, just real and fleeting, and hers alone. The music did not end when the record reached its final groove. It continued inside her, echoing long after the sound itself softened into silence. Marilyn remained standing at the center of the stage, breathing slowly, as if afraid that moving too quickly might wake the world again. She had learned over the years that happiness could vanish the moment it was acknowledged, so she stayed still. She let the quiet settle around her like a blanket. The studio felt different now, not empty, but full. Full of something fragile and rare. She walked to the edge of the stage and sat, letting her legs dangle, her bare feet brushing the darkness below. This was the place where she was usually told to wait, to be ready, to be perfect, to be someone else. But tonight there were no instructions. She leaned back on her hands and tilted her face upward, staring at the grid of lights above, most of them dark. She thought about how strange it was that the happiest moments of her life were always the ones no one saw. No photographers, no applause, no headlines. The joy never came when she was adored, it came when she was forgotten. She stood again and crossed the stage slowly, tracing paths she knew by heart. She stopped near a mirror, one of the tall ones used for blocking shots. She almost turned away. She had spent her life avoiding mirrors unless they were necessary. They reminded her of work, of scrutiny, of correction. But this mirror was different. The light was dim, the reflection imperfect. She stepped closer. She did not see Marilyn Monroe. She saw a woman with flushed cheeks, slightly messy hair, eyes still bright from movement. She saw effort, she saw warmth, she saw something unguarded. She raised a hand and touched the glass, not to adjust herself, but to confirm she was there. She smiled gently, not the practiced smile, not the one that tilted just right, but a small private one that appeared and disappeared without permission. She remembered learning to smile like that as a child, when no one was watching because smiling for herself felt safer. She turned away from the mirror and moved again, this time slower, as if the music had changed into something softer inside her. She swayed instead of dancing. She let her weight shift from one foot to the other. She let her arms move without intention. She remembered other nights like this, rare and scattered like stars. She remembered dancing alone in hotel rooms, radio turned low, curtains drawn tight. She remembered the feeling of being young and unknown, when movement was about excitement instead of obligation. She remembered how much she loved dancing before it became something to sell. She crossed the stage again and sat on the floor this time, legs folded beneath her. She rested her elbows on her knees and let her chin fall into her hands. She felt tired but not exhausted. This was a good tired. The kind that came from using the body for joy instead of survival. She thought about how many people believed they knew her. They knew the walk, the voice, the laugh. They knew the shape of her body and the stories attached to it. But they did not know this. They did not know that happiness for her was quiet. They did not know that she feared being seen most when she was most herself. She lay back on the floor and stared at the ceiling again, arms spread wide as if she were floating. She imagined the soundstage filling with sunlight instead of darkness. She imagined a life where dancing was not preparation for something else but the thing itself. She imagined mornings without schedules and nights without fear. She imagined being ordinary and found herself smiling at the thought. She did not hate fame. She hated the weight of it. She hated how it followed her even into silence. But tonight it had loosened its grip. She rolled onto her side and closed her eyes, letting the memory of the music replay in her mind. She felt safe here for now. She did not know how long the night would last, but she knew she would remember this empty stage, this unobserved joy, this feeling of being complete without being consumed. And somewhere deep inside her, where the world could not reach, she wished she could stay in this moment forever. The night continued to hold her as if it understood how rare this version of her was, and how easily it could disappear if disturbed. Marilyn remained on the floor longer than she intended, feeling the coolness of the wood beneath her back, grounding her in a way no applause ever had. The studio smelled faintly of dust and old fabric, and something metallic from the lighting rigs, a smell she associated with work and pressure and repetition, but tonight it felt neutral, almost comforting. She slowly sat up and hugged her knees to her chest, rocking slightly, the way she had learned to soothe herself long before fame taught her different habits. She was not thinking about tomorrow. She was not thinking about contracts or expectations or the careful choreography of being seen. She was thinking about how light her body felt when it moved without permission. She stood again slowly, as if honoring the silence, and began to walk the perimeter of the soundstage, her fingers grazing walls, props, chairs, objects that usually belonged to other people's instructions. She felt like a visitor in a place she technically owned with her labor. She stopped near a stack of folded costumes and lifted one gently, letting the fabric fall back into place. She had worn so many versions of herself that it sometimes felt like she no longer knew which weight belonged to her. She moved back toward the center of the room and began to dance again, but this time it was different. It was not release, it was reflection. Her movements became smaller, more deliberate, as if she were listening to something deeper than rhythm. She let her arms circle slowly, her hands tracing shapes in the air she could not name. She turned once and stopped, then again, then paused, as if each motion needed permission from her own breath. She felt a sudden swell of emotion that surprised her. Not sadness. Not joy alone, but a mixture of both, the kind that comes when something beautiful is also temporary. She understood then why these moments mattered so much. They were proof. She had always feared that without an audience she might disappear. But here she was, alone, and she was more solid than she had ever felt. She thought about the girl she had been before anyone told her she was special, the girl who danced because it felt like flying. The girl who believed happiness was something you stumbled into, not something you earned. She realized she had been chasing that girl ever since, through stages and screens and strangers' expectations. And now, for this brief stretch of night, she had caught up. She moved closer to the mirror again, not to inspect herself but to acknowledge the presence reflected there. She did not flinch this time. She did not correct her posture. She did not search for approval. She simply looked. She saw exhaustion, but not defeat. She saw softness, but not weakness. She saw a woman who had survived becoming an idea. She reached up and brushed her hair back with her fingers, letting it fall naturally. She thought about how much energy it took to be watched, to be desired, to be interpreted. She thought about how little energy it took to simply exist. She stepped away from the mirror and turned off the record player, closing its lid gently, as if tucking the night away for safekeeping. Silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It was full of everything she had felt. She walked toward the exit slowly, not because she wanted to leave but because she knew the night could not last forever. She paused at the edge of the stage one last time and looked back at the space she had claimed without permission. She knew no one would ever know exactly what happened here. No one would write about it. No one would photograph it. No one would believe it mattered. But it mattered to her, and that was enough. She slipped her shoes back on and felt the weight return slightly, but not completely. Some of the lightness stayed with her. She carried it quietly like a secret. She unlocked the door and stepped into the hallway where the world waited to resume its demands, but something had shifted. She had danced without being seen, and in doing so she had reminded herself that she existed beyond the image. That somewhere beneath the layers and lights and loneliness, there was still a woman who could move freely in the dark and feel whole. And she promised herself without words that she would remember this night, not as an escape but as evidence, that happiness did not always need witnesses, that sometimes the truest version of herself only appeared when no one was watching. The night released her slowly, not all at once, but in fragments that followed her beyond the studio walls and into the city streets where headlights smeared across wet pavement and distant laughter drifted from places she would never enter. She walked alone beneath street lamps that flickered like tired stars, her coat pulled tight, her steps unhurried, as if moving too quickly might fracture what she had just reclaimed. The city did not recognize her without the lights and entourage, and she welcomed the anonymity the way one welcomes sleep after a long illness. She felt taller somehow, not in posture but in presence, as if the simple act of dancing unseen had restored a piece of herself that had been quietly eroding for years. She passed closed diners, empty bus stops, windows glowing faintly behind curtains where ordinary lives continued without spectacle. She wondered briefly what it would be like to be one of them, to move through the world without being interpreted, but the thought did not ache the way it once had. It felt neutral, like a possibility she no longer needed to mourn. She reached her apartment and climbed the stairs slowly, listening to the echo of her footsteps, each one grounding her further in the present. The door closed behind her with a soft finality. She did not turn on the lights right away. She stood in the darkness and breathed, letting the silence settle again, not as emptiness but as something earned. She removed her coat and laid it carefully over a chair, then crossed the room barefoot, the floor cool beneath her skin. She caught her reflection briefly in a window and did not stop to analyze it. She no longer needed confirmation. She moved through the space as if it belonged to her fully. Not as a refuge from the world, but as an extension of the night she carried inside her. She poured a glass of water and drank it slowly, feeling the simple relief of thirst quenched. She sat on the edge of the bed and let her shoulders fall forward, the tension leaving them at last. She thought about how tomorrow would arrive whether she was ready or not, bringing schedules and expectations and the familiar weight of being seen. But she also knew something tomorrow could not take away. She had proof now. Not written, not photographed, not shared, but real. She lay back and closed her eyes, and for a moment the music returned in memory, not as sound but as sensation, the way her body had moved, the way the air had felt against her skin. She understood then that happiness did not always announce itself. It did not always arrive with witnesses or permanence. Sometimes it appeared quietly, asked nothing, and left behind a trace strong enough to carry through darker days. She fell asleep not thinking of applause or loneliness or the future, but of motion, of warmth, of a woman alone on a darkened stage choosing herself for a few unrecorded hours. And somewhere between waking and dreaming, she smiled, not for anyone else, but because she knew that no matter how loud the world became again, there would always be a night when she danced, and no one was watching and she was enough.